In a land divided by blood and silence, two souls must decide to fight.
If we don't make it past the ridge, there's no turning back. Out here, under the same sky that took everything from them, they found something neither expected: peace.
"Please, just make it quick," she said, but the rancher saw her eyes and couldn't pull the trigger. The Woman Beneath the Tree, Part 1. Red Mesa, Arizona Territory, June 1882. The wind cut like iron filings. It hissed through the sage and dry grass, carrying the dust of the old mesas and the smell of heat that never seemed to die. Out here, the wind wasn't weather, it was a voice. It talked when men were silent, sang when graves were fresh. I'd lived with that sound long enough to know it better than my own heartbeat. That morning, I was checking the southern fence, same as every day since spring began to dry the creeks. I had one hand on the wire and the other on my thoughts, both rusted with time. The land stretched endless brown, cracked, cruel, and somehow still mine. I'd been alone on this patch for 6 years now, long enough for the silence to start feeling like company. My name's Elias Kane. Used to wear a cavalry coat and take orders from men who thought God rode with them. When the war ended, so did that illusion. I came here to forget, and for the most part, I did. The land doesn't ask questions. It just takes what you give it: sweat, blood, and sometimes the parts of your soul you didn't mean to spend. I stopped to tighten a post, hammer echoing against the emptiness. The sound died quick. Even echoes don't hang around in a place like Red Mesa. Somewhere behind me, the wind dragged a tumbleweed across the plain. Then silence again, wide, heavy, and complete. That's when I noticed it. Something that didn't belong to the land. At first, it was just a shape too still, too tall to be brush. I squinted against the sun, shading my eyes. The cottonwood tree by the dry arroyo stood alone, a black mark against the white sky. But there was something hanging from it. My stomach tightened. I've seen death in too many shapes not to recognize its posture. Still, I rode closer. The horse shifted beneath me, uneasy, snorting at the scent that rides before tragedy. 50 yards out, I saw her. A woman. She hung from the low branch, arms bound above her head, toes barely brushing the ground. Her dress was torn rawhide, dusted in sand and blood. Her hair, long, black, tangled, whipped across her face like a flag of surrender that never came. The sight stopped me cold. You'd think after years of war and loneliness, a man would grow numb to cruelty. But there are things the desert can't bleach out of you. I slid off the horse, boots sinking into the hot dust. My hand brushed the butt of the Colt at my side, not for fear, just for company. The closer I walked, the clearer it became. She wasn't gone yet. Her chest moved, shallow, barely there. The wind lifted the hair from her face, and I saw her eyes, dark as river stone, sharp as truth. The ropes had carved deep into her wrists. There was blood caked down her arms, flies buzzing where shame should have been. Whoever did this hadn't just wanted her dead, they wanted her broken. I looked around. No fresh hoofprints, no wagon ruts. The sand had swallowed every trace of them, like the land itself didn't want to remember. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for my conscience to start clawing through the dust I'd buried it under. Finally, I muttered, "Hell with it." I pulled the knife from my belt, climbed onto a low root, and sawed through the rope. Her body sagged, light as dried grass. I caught her before she hit the ground. "Isu," I said, voice low. "You're safe now." She didn't answer, just gasped once, air rattling through cracked lips. I fetched the canteen from my saddlebag, tilted it gently to her mouth. She drank slow, desperate. The water ran down her chin and into the dust, leaving dark spots that vanished in seconds. Her eyes fluttered open again. For a moment, she looked at me like I was another executioner. Then something in her gaze shifted, not trust, but recognition, like she'd seen too much death to mistake mercy when it came. Her lips moved. I bounced closer. "Toba," she whispered Navajo words, soft and broken. I didn't know what they meant, but they sounded like a prayer that ran out halfway. "Easy," I said again. Don't talk. You'll tear the skin worse. Hence. I lifted her into the saddle, her weight nothing but bone and will. The ride home was long, every hoofbeat pounding the question I didn't want to answer. What in God's name are you doing, Elias? Red Mesa was a half-day's ride west, but my cabin sat far enough from town to be invisible. I'd built it that way on purpose. Folks called me a hermit. Some called me worse. I didn't care. A man alone can't disappoint anyone but himself. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun had sunk into the cliffs, bleeding its last light across the sky. The woman hadn't made a sound the whole way, though I felt her shiver once against my arm. Fever. Maybe. Fear. More likely. I carried her inside, laid her on the cot, and lit the oil lamp. The place wasn't much. One room, one bed, a stove that smoked on windy nights, but it was clean. I boiled water, tore a strip from a clean sheet, and started cleaning her wounds. The rope burns were deep. She'd been hanging there for hours. Her back was bruised, shoulders raw, but no bones broken. Luck, if you believe in that kind of thing. She stirred when the cloth touched her skin. Don't, she murmured. I ain't hurtin' you, I said quietly. I'm fixin' what they tried to end. I poured whiskey over the cuts. She gasped a quick, sharp breath but didn't flinch away. That kind of strength isn't taught. It's born. When I finished, I sat back in the chair by the fire. My hands were shaking, though not from exhaustion. It had been a long time since I'd touched another living soul without meaning harm or being afraid of it. She slept. The fire popped, shadows crawling across her face. Even burned and beaten, she carried something noble, a dignity I hadn't seen since the war, when men still believed in right and wrong before the dust swallowed both. I didn't know who she was, or why anyone would hang her like that, but I knew one thing. The men who did it would come looking, and when they did, I'd have to decide if this was a fight I was still capable of. Outside, the wind rose again, moaning through the cottonwoods like a preacher too tired to save his flock. I leaned back, staring into the flame. A man spends his life thinking he's done with the world, then the world leaves a dying woman hanging from a tree in his path, and suddenly, the old fire starts to burn again. Maybe that was fate, maybe just guilt. Either way, I knew this much. I couldn't ride away this time, not after all the graves I'd already ridden past. I reached for my hat, hung it on the wall, and muttered into the silence, "All right, girl. You made your point. Let's see what comes next." No? Outside, the wind carried a whisper through the cracks of the cabin, not words, but something older. The desert doesn't forgive, but sometimes, if you listen close enough, it lets you begin again. And maybe that's what I was hearing, not the ghosts I'd buried, but the sound of something waking back up. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away, and if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. When dawn finally came, it came thin and pale, crawling slow across the mesa like a tired animal. The storm of night had passed, but the air still smelled of old fire and fear. I'd sat by her side for hours, half asleep, half waiting for her to stop breathing. But she didn't. Every few minutes, her chest rose just enough to remind me that death hadn't won yet. The coffee on the stove had burned itself bitter, black as tar. I poured some anyway, because men like me don't know what else to do with mourning. She stirred when the chair creaked. I looked over. Her eyes were open, dark, sharp, alive again, though the light in them was more defiance than peace. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt like a test neither wanted to fail. "You're safe," I said quietly. My voice sounded strange, like it hadn't been used in years. Her gaze moved slow across the cabin, the fire, the bandages, the walls. Then it came back to me. Her lips cracked when she tried to speak. I fetched the tin cup and held it to her mouth. "Easy, small sips." She obeyed, water trembling down her chin. When she was done, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, looked at me, and whispered, "Why?" "Why what?" "Why, help me." I set the cup down on the floorboards. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. "Because you were still breathing," I said finally. "And a man ought to help the living before they turn to ghosts." She frowned, as if testing the truth of that. "Men don't help my kind." I met her eyes. Maybe men don't, but I ain't sure I count anymore. Her gaze lingered, unreadable. I'd faced men with rifles and soldiers with orders, but nothing cut through armor like those eyes, patient, suspicious, and unafraid. The rest of the morning passed in quiet labor. I fixed the broken shutter, checked the fire, tried to ignore the strange awareness of another heartbeat in the room. The desert outside was silent except for the wind pushing against the walls like an old hand testing its strength. By noon, she'd managed to sit up. The blanket slipped off her shoulders, revealing rope burns along her wrists. They looked worse in daylight, raw red circles that spoke of cruelty without words. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Talanez." I nodded. "You're Navajo." "I was," she said. "To the white men in Red Mesa, I'm something less than that." There was no self-pity in her voice, just fact. "They the ones who hung you?" "Yes. They said I took a steer from Crowley's herd." Her tone sharpened. "I took nothing. The earth feeds me. I don't steal from the dead." "Dead?" She looked toward the door. "That land is cursed. The white men dig for copper and find bones instead. They don't bury them again." I poured her more water. "Crowley owns half the town. Law don't touch him. Then who touches him?" Her question hung there like smoke. I didn't answer. There was a time when I would have said, "The army," or "God." Those days were gone. "You should rest," I said finally. She looked at me long and steady. "Rest comes when we stop running." She was right, though I didn't admit it. The sun rose higher, bleeding white through the cracks in the roof. Heat shimmered on the floorboards. I stepped outside to check the horizon. The world stretched endless sagebrush, dust, and the memory of battles no one remembered anymore. That's when I saw the dust trail. 3 riders, 2 straight, 2 fast, men with purpose. I went back inside, closing the door quietly. "You got anyone looking for you?" Her head snapped up. "Why?" "Because I've got visitors coming, and they don't ride like friends." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. I caught her before she hit the floor. "Crowley's men," she breathed. "He won't rest until I hang from that tree again." "Well," I said, grabbing the rifle from above the door, "he'll have to climb over me first." "You don't know what you're doing," she warned. Story of my life. I stepped out onto the porch. The riders slowed as they neared the gate. One of them was Lyle Young, nervous, still wearing the star of a deputy he didn't have the stomach to use. The others I didn't know, but I knew their kind. Crowley's men wore greed the way preachers wear guilt. "Morning, Kane," Lyle called, tipping his hat. "Deputy," I said, resting the rifle against my shoulder. "Fine day to go bother someone else." "We're looking for an Indian woman," he said. "Escaped punishment last night." "Didn't know hanging people without trial counted as punishment," I said. The older gunman spat into the dust. "You seen her or not?" I looked past them, toward the endless stretch of desert. "Ain't seen a soul all week, just the wind." The 3 exchanged glances. Lyle looked uneasy. "Mind if we take a look around?" "I do mind." The silence that followed was heavy as thunder. Then I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You boys really want to cross that line for Crowley? 'Cause once you do, there's no riding back." The taller man cursed under his breath. "Let's go. She's dead by now anyway." And they turned their horses and rode off slow, dust trailing behind like shame that wouldn't stick. When I went back inside, Tala was standing by the hearth, holding my revolver with both hands. Her arms shook, but her aim didn't. "You lied for me," she said. "Wouldn't be the first lie I told." I hung the rifle back on the wall. "But maybe the first one worth it." She studied me, eyes narrowing. "You risked your life for a stranger. Maybe I just got tired of being alive for nothing." "Oh." Her expression softened, barely. "Then we're the same." The fire crackled, throwing soft light over her face. She looked different now, not just wounded, but awake. Something fierce lived in her again, something I hadn't seen in anyone for years. Outside, the wind had changed direction. It blew from the south, carrying the scent of rain. The world felt charged, like the air before a duel. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "I know." "Ove. And when they come?" I picked up the coffee pot, poured myself a cup, and smiled without humor. "Then we'll give them something to remember." That night, she didn't sleep much. Neither did I. The storm clouds were gathering beyond the cliffs, heavy and dark. I could feel the weight of it pressing down the promise of blood or cleansing, maybe both. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You think your God watches you still?" she asked suddenly. I thought about it. If he does, he's got a cruel sense of humor. "In my tongue," she said, "we have no word for God, only for the great listening, the one who hears everything, but speaks little." I nodded slowly. "Sounds like someone I could get along with." For the first time, she smiled. Small, real. It cut through the cabin's shadows like sunrise through smoke. Maybe that's how trust begins, not with words, but with a look that says you ain't alone anymore, even if the world says you are. The wind moaned against the door. Somewhere in the dark, thunder muttered a warning. I looked at her and realized the desert had finally sent me something I couldn't fence out life. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. By dusk, the wind was restless again, a mean, electric wind that scraped dust from the cliffs and carried it like smoke. The sky above Red Mesa had turned the color of old copper. You could feel something brewing, not just in the weather, but in the air between people and fate. Tala sat by the window, watching the horizon. I'd caught her doing that, often staring like she could read danger before it showed its face. "They'll come again," she said quietly. I checked the rifle. "They always do." She turned to me. "You should let me go." "Not happening. Then you'll die for nothing. Better than living for it." Her eyes lingered on me a long moment, then softened. "You speak like a man who stopped waiting for mercy." I shrugged. Mercy's just a word folks use before they pull the trigger. Outside, the sun sank behind the mesas, leaving the sky bleeding red and gold. I stepped out to bring in the horse. The air was heavy, too still, too watchful. Then I saw it, a flicker of light at the ridge, a spark, the reflection of a rifle scope. I cursed under my breath and shouted, "Down!" The first bullet hit the porch rail, splintering wood. The second whistled past my ear. I dove behind the water trough, rolling into the mud. My shoulder flared with old pain, the kind that remembers its own scars. Inside, I heard Tala hit the floorboards. "They found us," I shouted. "I know," she called back. Her voice wasn't panicked, just fierce. I crawled toward the doorway, firing 2 rounds toward the ridge. The flash gave away their position. 3 men, maybe 4. Crowley's riders. I reloaded, quick and rough, hands slick with sweat. "You armed?" I asked through the smoke. "I am now," she said, appearing beside me, holding the revolver I'd left by the fire. Her wrists still bore the marks of rope, but her aim was steady as a preacher's prayer. "You ever shot before?" She met my eyes. "Only when hunted." The next volley of shots tore into the cabin. Wood splintered, a lantern crashed, flames licking across the floor. Tala grabbed a blanket, smothered it before the fire could spread. "Good thinking," I muttered, slamming another cartridge into the Winchester. "We'll need that kind of luck." "That wasn't luck," she said. "That was work." We both fired through the open window. One of the men fell from his horse. The others spread out, circling. I knew their kind killers who liked the sound of their own cruelty. A voice called out through the dark, "Kane, hand over the squaw, and maybe we'll let you die quick." I spat into the dirt. "Tell Crowley he'll have to send better men." They answered with bullets. One hit the side of the cabin. Another slammed into the doorframe inches from Tala's head. She didn't flinch. I turned to her. "You scared?" She shook her head. "I've already died once." The way she said it made something twist inside me. There was no tremor, no lie, just truth, pure and heavy. Lightning ripped across the sky, followed by thunder that shook the earth. The storm broke, rain pouring, wind screaming. The world turned to noise and fury. I leaned out to fire again and felt a sudden punch in my side. The rifle slipped from my hand. The ground tilted. Tala caught me before I fell. "Elias, just a scratch," I lied, though the blood was hot and fast under my palm. She dragged me behind the hearth, her breath ragged. "Stay still," she said, tearing the bandage from her own arm and pressing it against the wound. They will rush in soon, then we'll greet them proper. Her eyes flashed. No, you stay. Before I could argue, she rose, grabbed the revolver, and moved toward the door. She moved like shadow quiet. Sure, the rain masking her steps. Through the crack in the door, I saw her slip out into the storm. Damn it, Tala, I whispered, trying to stand. My vision swam. The pain pulsed with every heartbeat. Outside, thunder drowned the world. Then one gunshot. Two. Silence. I staggered to the doorway, bracing myself. Rain washed down the steps. Through the curtain of water, I saw 2 men down. A third stumbled toward the horses, bleeding. Tala stood over him, face lit by lightning, soaked to the bone, a figure carved out of storm and vengeance. She fired once more. He dropped. She turned back toward me, breath heaving, hair plastered to her face. For a moment, she looked like something more than human, part woman, part wild. When she reached me, her hands went straight to the wound. "You're bleeding too much," she said. "Sit." I told you. Sit. Saturday. She heated the knife in the fire, the metal glowing red. I watched her face while she worked, calm, precise, almost reverent. She pressed it against my side. Pain flared white. I bit down on my sleeve to keep from yelling. "Breathe," she ordered. "If you stop, your spirit will leave through the hole." I breathed. Because somehow, with her voice in my ear, I wanted to. When it was done, she packed the wound with sage and cloth, then tied it tight. Her fingers brushed my skin rough, careful, alive. I leaned back, sweat cold on my face. "Where'd you learn that?" "My mother was a healer," she said softly, "before the soldiers burned our camp." The fire flickered between us, painting the room in gold and shadow. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. "You saved my life," I said. She sat across from me, eyes still fierce. "You saved mine first. I guess we're even." "No," she said. "We are alive. That is not even. That is beginning." Something in me cracked open a place I thought the desert had turned to stone. I looked at her, the woman I'd found hanging from a tree, and realized she wasn't my burden. She was my mirror. Both of us ghosts trying to remember what it meant to be human. We sat there a long while, listening to the storm fade into the distance. Every now and then, the thunder rolled like a reminder that peace never stays long in this land. But for that moment, the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of breath, of fire, of something new taking root. She rose first, poured water into a tin cup, handed it to me. Our hands brushed. For a man like me, that was a prayer. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the scent of wet sage and blood. The world had changed, though the land hadn't noticed. "Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you." The storm broke just before dawn. Lightning walked across the mesas like fire from heaven, and the rain came down hard enough to sting. I saddled the horse slow, my shoulder aching where the bullet had gone through. Tala tightened the girth straps without a word. She'd been up all night, patching what she could, readying what she couldn't. "We can't stay," she said. "They'll follow the bodies." I know. The sky glowed bruised purple over the ridges. Every flash of light painted her face in gold and silver, fierce, determined, too alive for a world that liked its women quiet and dead. We rode out before sunrise, following the old trail east through Red Hollow. The air smelled of iron and mesquite. The rain turned the dust to red mud, sticking to the hooves and the heart. Neither of us spoke for miles. The sound of the horse and the storm filled the space where words would have gone. I tried not to think about what waited behind us, or what waited ahead. By midday, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The land opened wide, a bowl of stone and silence. In the distance, black thunderclouds crouched low like cattle refusing to move. Tala looked over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "They're coming," she said. I didn't need to ask who. 5 riders this time. The front one carried himself different, straighter, meaner. Crowley. "Well," I muttered, "guess the devil keeps his appointments." We spurred the horse forward, heading toward the canyon. The trail narrowed between cliffs of rust-colored rock, good cover, bad escape. I knew it the moment I saw it, but turning back wasn't an option. The wind howled through the pass, carrying Crowley's voice behind it. "Kane, You can't hide from what you are. I almost laughed. What I am died a long time ago. The first shot echoed through the canyon. The bullet chipped stone inches from Tala's head. She ducked, reined the horse aside. Another round followed, and another, the air alive with lead. We dismounted, taking cover behind the rocks. The rain returned, thick and cold. Water streamed down the cliff face, washing the blood from my fingers where I'd reopened the wound. Tala crouched beside me, reloading the revolver. Her hands were steady. We can't outrun them. I wasn't planning to. Her gaze flicked toward me, a question without words. I looked at her. There's a narrow path behind this ridge. Leads to the lava fields. You take the horse and ride till you find the black rock. Your people'll know it. She shook her head. No. Tala, you think I leave you here to die alone? Her voice was sharp, cutting through the thunder. You think that's what you saved me for? I gritted my teeth. You deserve a chance. Oh, so do you, she said. But men like you forget that living is also courage. I didn't have an answer. Another bullet struck near us, spraying dust. I peered around the rock. Crowley and his men were closing in, using the storm as cover. 5 shadows moving like ghosts through the rain. Stay low, I told her, raising the rifle. I fired once the shot cracked, echoing through the gorge. One rider went down. The others fanned out. Thunder rolled again, closer now, shaking the canyon walls. Crowley's voice carried through the chaos. You can't save her, Kane. You couldn't save your family, and you can't save her. The words hit harder than the bullets. I felt the memory rise, my wife coughing blood, my boy fading in my arms, the smell of sickness and failure. The war had taken my honor. The fever had taken the rest. Tala saw the change in my face. She reached for me, gripping my arm. You don't owe the dead, she said. You owe the living. Her words broke something open. When the next flash of lightning came, I rose from cover, aimed, and fired again. One more rider dropped, 2 left, plus Crowley. The echoes rolled across the rocks like drums. Crowley dismounted, moving between the horses. You really think this ends with her walking free? He shouted. She's nothing. A savage, a thief. She's more human than you ever were, I called back. He laughed short, cruel. Coming from a murderer hiding behind a woman? Tala stood then, water running down her face, revolver steady in her hand. You talk too much, she said. She fired. The bullet grazed his cheek, drawing blood. Crowley's smile vanished. He lifted his gun, aimed, and shot back. I stepped in front of her. The bullet tore through my coat, slammed into my chest like a hammer. I fell hard against the rock. The world went white. I heard her scream, my name distant, muffled, as if through water. Then another shot, then silence. When I opened my eyes, the rain had eased. Tala was kneeling beside me, her hands pressed against the wound, her face pale but fierce. Behind her, Crowley lay sprawled in the mud, eyes open to the sky. You're bleeding too much, she said. Yeah, I rasped, coughing. Seems to be a habit. Don't talk. Could have let him live. She shook her head. He was already dead. Just didn't know it. I managed a laugh, small and cracked. You've got a dark way of praying, woman. She smiled, faint, trembling. You said once the land forgives no one. Maybe it just takes longer to listen. The thunder rolled away into the distance. The rain slowed to a whisper. I felt the weight of her hands, the heat of her breath, the ache in my chest where pain met peace. Elias, she whispered, stay with me. I wanted to tell her I would, that I'd walk every mile of the desert just to see her face in morning light. But my voice was gone. Instead, I reached up, brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek, and whispered, Go, the world still needs you. Her eyes filled, but she shook her head. The world can wait. She tore a strip from her dress, bound my chest tight. Her hands moved fast, desperate, sure. The storm broke apart, sunlight spilling between the clouds like grace. The canyon glowed gold and red, steam rising from the rocks. It was the kind of beauty you only see after too much loss sharp enough to hurt. We buried Crowley under a slab of stone. No prayers, no words, just the sound of rain dripping into the earth. When it was done, Tala turned to me. What happens now? I looked at the horizon, where the sun burned through the last veil of storm. Now, I said, we ride somewhere that remembers mercy. She nodded, helped me onto the horse, and climbed up behind me, her arms wrapped around my waist, steadying both of us. The wind blew clean. The world smelled of wet dust and beginning. As we rode out of the canyon, I glanced back once at the place where blood and rain had mixed into the same red earth. Maybe the land had finally decided to listen. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. Bạn có muốn mình viết đa một 300 chữ ngay sau đây không? Đây sẽ là phần rebirth, healing. Hai người dựng cuộc sống mới ở vùng đất yên. Elias tìm lại niềm tin, kết bằng câu If you've made it this far, và cụm từ khóa Cowboy love stories. Wild West love. Wild West love story. The storm left the world quiet. Too quiet. Like the desert had emptied its lungs and decided to rest. We rode north for 2 days, through canyons that glowed like old embers. The land smelled of wet clay and forgiveness if such a thing existed. My wound ached, but the pain was clean, honest, the kind that reminds a man he's still alive. Tala rode beside me, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth torn from my coat. She didn't speak much, neither did I. Out here, silence was a language both of us understood. On the 3rd morning, we found a spring tucked between black lava rocks. Water clear as glass, cold enough to sting. She dismounted first, knelt, and touched it with her fingers as if greeting an old friend. This place remembers, she said. It's good. I filled the canteen, took a drink. Then we'll stay a while. We built a small shelter from mesquite and stone. Nothing fancy, just a roof against the sun, a wall against the wind. I cut branches. She stacked them. The rhythm of the work felt like prayer, slow, steady, alive. By dusk, a fire burned in the pit. The smoke curled straight into the sky, unbothered. Tala roasted corn she'd found along the trail. I sat sharpening my knife, the way men do when they can't admit they're at peace. You ever been still before? She asked suddenly. Still? Yes, not just waiting. Still. I thought about it. Not since before the war. Back then, being still meant waiting for something to die. She nodded. Then this is new. Her words sank deep. I stared at the fire, watching the embers shift. The desert night was wide and star-slicked. Every sound magnified: the wind, the crack of wood, her breathing. Why'd you come back for me in the canyon? I asked after a while. She looked up, eyes reflecting the firelight. Because you stopped running. Few men do. I smiled faintly. Didn't have anywhere left to go. Maybe that's what finding home means, she said. When the road ends, and you stay anyway. We didn't speak again for a long time. The fire burned low, leaving only the orange pulse of coals. I felt her gaze on me, not heavy, not wanting, just there, like the warmth of sunlight after a long winter. When sleep came, it came easy. No ghosts that night, no war dreams. Just the sound of rain somewhere far off, and the breath of a woman who'd once been a stranger. Morning broke clean. The sky was a sheet of pale blue, the kind that only appears after the desert's been washed. I stepped outside, stretched, and felt the stiffness of healing bone. Tala was already up, gathering herbs near the rocks. Her hands moved gentle, deliberate, like she was stitching the world back together. What are those for? I asked. For your wound, and for luck. Never put much stock in luck, she smiled. That's because you keep calling it by the wrong name. Later, we took the horses down to the flats. The wildflowers were out, small, stubborn bursts of purple and yellow clinging to the cracks of stone. She picked a few, placed them in a circle at the edge of the water. For those who didn't make it, she said softly. I stood beside her, hat in hand. You think they hear us? Not hear, she said. Feel. I wanted to believe that. Maybe I did. Days turned to weeks. The wound closed, leaving a new scar to join the old ones. I rebuilt the fence around the spring, more out of habit than need. She planted herbs in the shade, humming under her breath. Sometimes she spoke to the land in her tongue, words I couldn't understand, but somehow trusted. One evening, I came back from riding the ridge and found her sitting by the fire, the light catching her hair like copper threads. She looked up, smiled small. You found what you were looking for? She asked. Didn't know I was looking. Then what do you see? Peace, I said, and it scares me. She laughed quietly. Peace always does, at first. I sat beside her. The air smelled of sage and smoke. I thought about Crowley, about the tree, about every road that had led me here, and for the first time, none of it felt wasted. You ever think about going back? I asked. To what? To whatever life you had before. She shook her head. That life ended on the branch. This one began when you cut the rope. Her words landed like truth carved in stone. I reached out, hesitated, then touched her hand. She didn't pull away. Her skin was warm, real. After so many years of living half alive, that small contact felt like a heartbeat restarting. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments. The seasons changed slow. Spring melted into the long gold of summer. Sometimes travelers passed through miners, traders, wanderers. We never said much, never told them names. The desert keeps its own secrets. One of them once asked me, "You two married?" Tala laughed before I could answer. "In the way the wind marries the canyon," she said. The man didn't understand, but I did. Some unions don't need paper, just presence. There were nights when the wind howled across the flats, shaking the walls. She'd lie close, listening. "It's the spirits," she'd whisper. "They're restless." "Then let 'em be," I'd say. "They've earned it." Sometimes I'd wake before dawn and see her standing by the ridge, looking east, always east, toward where the sun breaks. "What are you looking for?" I asked once. "Tomorrow," she said simply. "I like to see it coming." That was her gift, to live forward, even when the past still cast its shadow. I never told her I loved her. The words felt too small for what we had. Love wasn't something spoken out loud out here. It was in the way she laid her hand on my shoulder when I worked, the way she left coffee boiling when I came in from the field, the way she never asked me to promise anything just to be. We had both been broken in different ways, but together we became less so. One evening, I fixed the last post of the new fence, straightened up, and saw her watching me from the porch. "Building walls again?" she teased. I smiled. "Not walls. Boundaries that keep the wind honest." She laughed, a sound like rain on tin. And just like that, I knew the truth. I wasn't mending fences anymore. I was mending myself. When the sun set that night, it painted the desert in gold and fire. I sat by the spring, listening to the water. The same cottonwood tree stood far in the distance, a dark mark on the horizon. I thought of the day I found her hanging there, of the man I was then. The land had taken everything from me once. Now, somehow, it had given something back. Maybe that's all redemption really is. Not being forgiven, but being allowed to try again. Tala came to sit beside me. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was home. Today's story is about pains that seemed to have no way out until a small ray of light changed everything. Do you believe that, even in the darkest times, there's always a miracle waiting at the end of the road? And if deep down you still believe that God is watching over you, quietly arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment, AMEN, below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write it, a blessing may quietly find its way into your life.